Welcome to Coffee by the Creek with Susan Bryce, postpartum doula. I'm glad you're here today. We've been reading from Chicken Soup for the New Mom's Soul, and we have moved into the chapter A Shoulder to Lean On. And I hope you'll find the stories in this chapter encouraging as to what life can be like with a newborn, in addition to your family, and just learn some things from the stories. And I would also like to know if you have suggestions, tips, tricks that you think every new mom should know and be able to take advantage of. Be sure to drop them in the comments below the video, or if you want to stay anonymous because I might use these in a blog post, just send them to me in a message on the Care for Mom page. So today's story is titled, It's Not a Piece of Cake. And some days it really feels like it's more like a mud pie. That's not part of the title. I added that. So my first child was less than a month old the day that I leaned limp and crying against the front door. The salesperson knocking on the other side of it must have heard the hysterical shrieking coming from the crib. But I refused to answer the door. I could feel my confidence crumbling amid shattered expectations and wished fervently that my mother would somehow read my muddled mind and come to the rescue. Throughout my childhood, my mother fit the mold of being everything that everyone expected of her. She was disciplined and organized in a way that I would never come to understand in the time that I was living under her roof. Nor did I ever truly comprehend the level of competence and responsibility with which she faced each aspect of her life. In my own first days of motherhood, I would come to resent that competence. It's not that she wouldn't have come if I had called. A woman who had always made time for me, she would have dropped her current activity and arrived with record promptness. She would have come bearing food and cleaning supplies and a shoulder to cry on. She would have been the pillar of strength and security that compensated for my own inadequacies. If only I could have dredged up my own inner power and matched her practiced efficiency. As the tears dried on my tired cheeks and I watched the baby finally sleeping, unbidden bitterness crept in. How dare she let me grow up with the misconception that being a mom was a piece of cake? With what delusion had I decided that I could tackle the endless demands of homemaking, pregnancy-induced bodily changes, and the adjustment to new motherhood? Whose wisdom had I subjected myself to that had resulted in a situation for which I was clearly not designed? And why, when I had been successful at so many other ventures, did I have to be a failure at the one thing that meant the most to me? The morning came when I did make the call. The gloom that was covering my home was becoming too thick to see through, and the tears were flowing too freely for reason. When the last of the dishes were put away and the worst of the laundry taken care of, I faced my mother with the questions that had plagued me. Why had she made it look so easy, so that I was completely unequipped for the reality of motherhood? When violent mood swings warred with sheer exhaustion, my mind had screamed in outrage at the image of her keeping her door frames dutifully dusted when I could barely find the energy to pick matching socks. Etched in my memory forever is the sad smile that filled her bewildered face and the words that would change my perspective forever. Sitting comfortably with a warm mug in hand, she reached across to hold my shaky fingers and reminded me of the moments in my childhood when she had lost her temper with me. We reminisced about the times that the house had not been spotless, when the meal had burned, or the laundry had gotten behind, and I began to remember the mornings when we had been late getting up, and the days when we had lost something valuable, or forgotten something important, or endured a great disappointment. And she confided that there had been moments of sadness, of frustration, of feeling overwhelmed. My eyes filled with familiar tears. Why, I asked. If you had experienced these same difficult times, had I never known it? Why did I grow up believing that you lived in some kind of enviable bliss? She met my confused expression with rueful eyes. Because above all else, she answered, it was important to ensure that my child grow up knowing unconditional love, untainted by moments of anger or distress. I had to make my child feel cherished, she said, and not reminded of those inconveniences you innocently caused. That afternoon, in my small, dusty home, I became acquainted with my mother, the woman. 2 generations saw each other with impeccable clarity for one timeless instant. The moment was healing. Join me again tomorrow for our next story. If you identified with the hopelessness, the inadequacies that you feel with just being overwhelmed with being a new mom, be sure to reach out to someone and maybe adjust your expectations a little bit or ask for some help. Again, thanks for joining, and I'll see you again.